Hello and welcome to footballdiscovery.com, where coaching and learning meet. This week we speak to Irish International Under-16s coach James Scott. James speaks to us on all matters football development, and whether you're a player, coach, interested parent, or like us, just a football addict, we hope you'll enjoy it. Okay, so James Scott, FEI Development Officer for North Tipperary and Under-16s International Coach with Ireland. Welcome to footballdiscovery.com.
Thanks very much, Conor. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So we're going to go straight into it and going to ask you, I suppose, for our listeners, can you paint just what the pathway is for young players in Ireland at the moment from their grassroots club and then leading up to, let's say, underage international football?
Yeah, well, look, I'll probably come from the point of view, obviously I'm a development officer in North Tipperary, so I kind of come from a player maybe in North Tipperary. Firstly, you know, when I came in here today, there was kids out playing under 8s, under 9 blitzes. That's where we kind of start with the clubs, playing futsal. Then in under 10, we'd have our first kind of get together in terms of elite players. Well, I wouldn't say elite players that age, but you know, players coming together, selected from clubs. And we have an under 10 futsal academy. Following from that, then we have an under 11 Future Stars Academy, again regionalised in 4 little areas around North Tipperary, and then that leads into the under 12 Emerging Talent Programme, which would be the first kind of FEI league centre programme at 12s, 13s and 14s. Of course, that would lead up then to your Kennedy Cup at under 14, and that like is, you know, a few years ago that was kind of the first time you kind of come in front of FEI player development or identification staff. With the lead into the under-15 international squads, but now we've got the regional ETP at 12s, 13s and 14s, so we have a very, very good idea of the players of the high calibre in all over Ireland. And then we also have an under-14 national assessment squad now as well, where we've 5 players from North Tipperary actually in that at present. So that's where I suppose they get identified for international football. So at under 15, then you've got your centre of excellence. So we train every Monday night in UL and Limerick, where the best players in the 5 leagues, Desmond, County, Clare, Limerick District and North Tipperary would feed into that. And that then allows Jason O'Donoghue, the Ireland under 15 manager, to basically assess players, and the best players then get identified to go up for national assessments and so on. So that's, you know, where your first age is under 15 international is your first age is international. And after that then year it comes into Paul Ozam's squad that I'm a coach with at under 16. A little bit probably more difficult to keep an eye on players because they're not in the centre of excellence anymore, and it depends on where the players are. Some players could be playing with, like, you know, local league clubs, some could be playing in national league clubs. Some players could be playing over in England. We've 2 players in the Victory Shield squad next week that have been identified by our player ID staff over in England. A kid from Arsenal and a kid from Bolton. So that's basically, you know, the pathway through. Obviously as well we have under 17, under 19 League of Ireland leagues now, and some of the players would be in under 17 League of Ireland as well. They have to be 16 to do it, but some of our players would be in that as well.
Very good. So I think that's very clear there to see the pathways that exist now. I suppose if you go back 10, 15 years ago, you think of Vincent Butler's under 15s teams down through the years. The structures within Ireland at the time, you know, okay, different for the DDSL obviously, but for players outside the DDSL, the Kennedy Cup was kind of the be-all and end-all for the likes of Vincent in terms of his player ID.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore.
Well, no, it's not. Look, there's 12 FEI regional centres, and, like, you know, and I said it goes down to under 12 now. So under 12s, 13s, 14s, and under 15s, the best players in the region will be in these centres. So, you know, it allows you see them develop, and it gives you a good idea who the best players are. You know, obviously 10, 15 years ago that was very, very difficult. So you could have a player in Donegal or whatever, and he could be a very, very good player, but it was just hard to see him playing against, you know, top quality opposition every week. So it made it a little bit more difficult.
So I think it's definitely clear that there's been progress there in terms of the structures in the game, and your 17s and 19s National League has been a great addition, I think. What else has changed? I mentioned, going back 10, 15 years ago, the types of players that were coming through back then and the types of players that are coming through now. There's lots of discussion about that in the media, about maybe some of the players nowadays are kind of overcoached or they're not streetwise. You've seen players at the highest end in this country. What's your view on this next generation of players, if you like?
Look, there's always people with different stories and this and that, and it's very good at the moment, it's not so good, and so on. But look, the players are there. Some of the players that we have in last year's under-16s were over in playing UEFA qualifiers in the last week, and they won their 3 games, and comprehensively, so some really, really top players, at top clubs, the Man Uniteds, the Arsenals, and so on. The players are there, they're coming through. By all means, there's a difference in the players 10 to 15 years ago, to now. Nowadays, the standard of coaching has improved and so on and so forth. But yeah, there is sometimes you probably say maybe there's a bit of overcoaching or maybe over analysis of things. But look, I don't think I think the big change probably hasn't been an Irish thing. It's more been if you go to Man City now, or if you go to Arsenal, or you go to Man United and you look at the roster of the under-13s, they're not dealing with English, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland players. They're dealing with players from Africa, from Europe, all over Europe and everything. It's unbelievable to see. I remember being in Man City Academy a few years ago, and I'd say there was only 3 or 4 English, you'd say, or Scottish or Irish players in each of the squads, plain simple, so. That's where the difficulties have come in now, and that's why, in many respects as well, you'd say English football is finding it difficult as well. Whereas if you go over to Germany and you go into Bayern Munich's under-14s, they're nearly all German. So it makes a big difference,
And then I suppose that age group, because you touched on Man City, so you look at a Jack Byrne, for example, goes over to a Man City, is loaned out to Holland last year. Now he's loaned out at Blackburn. He's 21, 22 now, and around that age. You look at the system here in Ireland, and we see in the European Championships, all the guys that played for us in the European Championships who went, if you like, the Irish route, who moved over a little bit later. Is that a viable option now, do you think?
I think big time. Absolutely. Look, you have different people kind of think, and back in the day it was, you have to go to England, but now with the under-17, under-19 League of Ireland, there's a good pathway for players there. And look, for me as well, it is a difficult one for a kid of 16 years of age to go over to England, to go into an environment that's totally different. No friends, no kind of social aspects that they have back home. Whereas now they can play 17s and 19s and go over when they're a little bit more mature, and more ready for a different environment like that. I think. Back in the day, maybe 10 years ago, you'd say you need to go because there wasn't a standard of coaching, there wasn't a standard of facilities and teams and so on every week that you play. But I think that is in place now. That's not to say that everyone should be staying or whatever. If someone thinks yes, I think I'll go to England, yeah, by all means, But I think there's a better fallback there now as well. Look, I'm sure maybe I might say this a couple of times, but. I'd always use the example of Shane Long in my local area. Shane went over to England maybe a little bit later. He went from Cork City, I think it was maybe 17 or 18. But Shane's man moved with him as well. So that was a massive thing for him as well. To have that kind of that comfort of someone from home with you as well. But it's a tough one for kids now.
It's really tough, and I remember, we've coached a lot of the same players down through the years. I would know a lot of the players in the same pool, I guess, in this part of the country. And one of the best players in the region in recent times that went over was Gary O'Neill, who was actually under-17s international captain, and was an absolutely sensational player. He's back at UCD now, has done brilliant the last 2 seasons. I heard him interviewed recently. He was asked, is England in his mind for next season maybe? And, almost the veracity in which he said, I've no interest in going back to England, maybe when I'm 24, 25. I mean, that kind of brings you home the point you're saying, and he mentioned, being near his family and stuff now. what do we need to do here in Ireland to make it, I suppose, a really viable alternative? So, like you're saying, you're not going to turn down a Wolverhampton in Gary's case, or a Reading in Shane Long's case. But what do we need to do you think, as a 16s international coach, to maybe bridge that gap a little bit more?
Well, look, it's you look at things like Cork City last week in the UEFA Champions League or Youth League, with the great result they got against Helsinki, and now playing AS Roma. It's things like that that are massive to keep kids, in Ireland and so on and so forth. And then, on the other one, then you have a look at Dundalk, up against St. Petersburg during the week. I think their total wage is a quarter of what Alex Wixel is getting. So it's unbelievable when you look at it. But I think we are good enough to compete against not against maybe teams of that money and so on caliber, but definitely against a lot of the mid kind of the Dutch teams and so on and so forth. So and the big thing that falls back again to is the support that goes to these games and all that. I know myself, this weekend you'll probably be in Dublin Airport or whatever, and the amount of people are going over to watch games in England when there's good games in Ireland as well. So that's what a lot of it comes back to as well. But I suppose if you had the key to how you're going to sort that, you'd be a rich man.
Yeah, that's a longer podcast, I think, definitely. But I think it's a very fair point. Is we all go over to England to watch Premier League games. It's at our doorstep. It makes sense. But maybe for the cost of doing that one less time in a season, you can have a season ticket with Dundalk. So hopefully that kind of breaks the mold now. And then the other side to that is, what will be very interesting is how these clubs reinvest this money, this European money now, because I think in the past, when the money was there, you look at your Shelburnes, and the money was reinvested by paying big wages for players.
It was short-term goals, kind of to maybe make it into the Champions League. But the longer thing is what we need to look at, to have in 10 years' time, to be going look at the academy we have and so on. I think a big one as well. It was a great initiative in Dublin as well, where some of the development officers done a TY course for kids, so they're actually in full-time training for their TY year. They do coach education, they do some gym instruction and things like that. So that'd be a great idea. I would love to see maybe a League of Ireland club or so on, or a couple of League of Ireland clubs coming together and having kids go to a certain school, maybe, so we could have them training in the morning, train in the afternoon, have access to good food in the canteen, maybe strength and conditioning, things like that. That's an ideal environment, because look, we spoke about kids going over and not going over and so on, but one of the biggest things and one of the biggest reasons that you would probably say I'll put my kid over to England, or if there was a club interested in him, is because of the contact hours and and so on. We don't really have that here, so we need to think a little bit outside the box. And I've always kind of been a big one. I remember a few years ago I went to Celtic Academy, and they've got St. Ninians, which is their local secondary school where all the kids go to, and I seen them train at 7:30 in the morning, seen them training after. They're getting nearly, I think it was 15 to 20 hours a week contact time, which is immense, and that's the big thing I always kind of say is, you're playing games and you're playing against good opposition and all that. You're kind of going, what if we had the same contact hours that they have and so on? Because I've gone on a fair few trips over the years, to different clubs and all that, and I've never ever, and I often say this, I've never ever seen coaches that I'm going, geez, they're so far advanced to what we have in this country. We have some really, really top class coaches in this country, and some very, very good people in football. It's just maybe to get that culture that we need to have 3, 4, 5 sessions a week to really, really develop the players, and how are we going to put that in place and think outside the box a little bit on that.
And when you say that, because that's a really interesting point, is that where this kind of, I suppose, media buzz at the moment about kind of overcoaching comes from, in your opinion, whereby maybe we get our players here in this country, or someone in a regional centre or a league centre, and you're so conscious that you get them once a week. So you're going to go away and play Scotland now, for example, as an international coach, knowing that the match between those two teams, you're playing against players that have put 3 times as much study in for that exam.
Yeah. Look, that's what I would, because even in Scotland, example, Celtic is one example, but they have high performance schools all around Scotland. Like so the best players there are in in school and train, and go to their academies as well. Like so, you are at a kind of even against Scotland. So that's where we need to be thinking: how do we bridge that gap? And I suppose then when you have the players in, you are in that thing, I must get through this, I must get through that, and so on, and you kind of nearly overload the players. We have to realise, we're dealing with players that are 12, 13, 14, 15, there's only so much you can give them. And the other thing as well is, how we improve that. Like the first time you get on a bike, you probably fall off it, you get your stabilisers, eventually they come off, you're able to ride a bike. But the same thing with coaching as well. Like we kind of tend to go, 1 week we'll do this, next week we'll do that, and so on, and it's kind of all over the place. We need to be a little bit more structured in what we do, and make sure the players get a good understanding of what we want to do in attacking and defending and in the transitions, rather than kind of saying, we must move on to this, move on to that. I always give the example, like if you come in on Monday morning into school and you do 10 minutes of English, 10 minutes of geography, 10 minutes of French and 10 minutes of German, you're either confused or you're asleep. But it's the same thing in football clubs. You go in every day or every week and you see sessions, and they could be doing 4 or 5 different things into one session. Yeah. So it's very, very hard for players to take it in.
So really that's back to coach education. It's back to block planning your sessions and having a long-term player-centred point of view. But I suppose just a point for any coaches listening in, heading, finishing, shooting, passing might all be happening in the session. 100%. But as a coach, you're saying to yourself, I'm going to focus on one area and stick to that for a long term. You mentioned, I suppose, using the environment and culture that you've kind of created here in North Tipperary, that the league have really got behind, and that you've been instrumental in since you come into your role. Just talk to us a little bit more about how you came about doing that. So you've got your national structure with emerging talent league centres, but you mentioned a number of programmes there at the beginning of this discussion. How did you come about choosing those, and how did they actually run? What does it look like?
Yeah, well, one of the things I looked at was, the emerging talent was starting at 12, but for me, the golden years probably are 9 to 12, or that's what allegedly a lot of people would say. That's 3-4 years of development that we weren't touching on, we'll say. So I looked at, we put in an under 10 academy, and we've nearly 100 players in that now. Is there, at under 10, I don't think there's such thing as a really elite players and so on, but definitely 100 players gives loads and loads of kids an opportunity to come in, to wear the kit, to fall in under that kind of thing we say when you're wearing an RTIP badge about how you act, your behaviours, your manners, your courtesy, respect, and so on. So all that comes in under that, and then we also brought in under 11 academy as well, so under 10 and under 11. So I was talking to a coach the other day that came on, one of our joined us this year as one of our academy coaches, and he couldn't believe how well mannered the kids were, how used they were to the sessions we were doing. It wasn't kind of introducing things to them, because he came in at under 12 and he thought this is the first time you're getting these kids, and we're saying no, some of these kids have been in for 3 or 4 years, because at under 10, some of them could be under 800 in the under 10 program, they could be under 9. So if you're a really, really good player at them ages, you've got 3 or 4 years development before you come into the under 12 program. So it's massive, it's absolutely massive. Now look, it's not easy. It can be difficult to run, there's 450 players in the program in RTIP, so you can imagine the logistics of that, to keep coaches and so on and so forth. But look, it's something that, the proof is in the pudding as well. Next week Barry Coffey's going away with Ireland under 16. We've had Tommy Holland, we've had Stevie Nolan, we've had the Keen Darcy's, and a number of guys that have been on development squads and been captain at senior international, or not senior international, but under 15, under 16 international, under 17 international. So look, it has definitely proven to be successful. And
you mentioned that success on the pitch there with your international players, but you also mentioned manners and the impact building a structure like you're building here has on that young person. How big are ye on kind of value and building an environment and a culture from creating trying to improve the person first.
Yeah, well, like, look, if you ask me, like, what's our philosophy, or what's my philosophy, or what's the NTSFL philosophy, or whatever, what I would say is develop the player, but develop the person as well. So that's always to the forefront of what we're doing. We want to develop the players as well. And the other thing I would say as well, another thing that we say, like, work hard and stay humble. Like, so, you know, everything that we do is aimed around developing the players, be it, you know, their behaviours, their manners, their please and thank you, all that stuff. They have their water, they have their gear. Everyone is expected to wear the exact same gear. All that stuff is just a given now. After training, they'll shake hands with all the coaches, all that kind of stuff. Whenever we go for trips, so we'll have, you know, teams going this year to Barcelona, teams going to Reading and Brighton and all that. You know, for me, there's no better success than after an event like that for someone involved in them clubs or whatever, turn around and say, geez, them players are a credit to you, like, because, you know, you can go out and you can beat maybe an academy squad or so on and so forth, and it's all great and all that, but little things like that are massive success. And the other thing as well for me is to see a player like, you know, maybe now at 22 or 23, and you meet him and he goes, oh, like, you know, and he comes up to you and he shakes hands with you and he goes, well, how's things? And you have great old, you know, a little chat or whatever about things that happened and Kennedy Cups and the different tournaments they're in and the trips they've done and so on. And you hear like that they're getting on, they've gone to college, they've got their degrees, now they're working, whatever. That's a massive success for us in both our boys and girls teams.
And like, I suppose just for those listening in, you're a UFA licensed coach, extremely experienced coach, done lots of courses and have lots of experience. But like that, developing the person first, you don't get much on the courses to help you do that. So I know you're an avid kind of reader of books and maybe looking outside the box a little bit in terms of doing that. Where have you drawn the influence from with kind of the off the pitch stuff, if you like?
Well, I suppose, like, look, you know, it comes from it comes from your own experiences. Like look, you know, if you said to me, if I look back now what I was doing 5 years ago, I'd say, Jesus, how was I ever doing that? Like, you know, so your experience is very, very important. Obviously, you know, going around and seeing what other people do, be it not just in football but in other sports as well, which I think is very, very important. Look, you know, definitely I would say Legacy would have been a book I would have read, like, about the All Blacks and how, like, you know, what their culture is like and so on. And it was an unbelievable book. In terms of you know, setting out what an All Black should perform like and behave like, so little things like that you pick up along the way, you know, are massive. Like, but that's what I'd say to coaches, like, you know, people would that know me know I say this very often, but every day is a school day, like, you know, and everything that you do you pick up something, you know, and the day you think you know it all, you may as well forget about it and pack it in.
And just on that, you mentioned Legacy, and I know on footballdiscovery.com we are going to be doing book reviews, if you like, in the future, and that's definitely one that's on the list. We're here in Nina AFC, I suppose, which is a great facility, also very clean dressing rooms. So speak to us about, I suppose, something that you've taken on as a mantle here in North Tipperary that I suppose you probably would have first encountered when you read Legacy.
Yeah, look, it's something I actually, before I even read Legacy, I don't know, I was talking to someone that was involved in the Aviva Stadium or was involved in rugby or whatever, and just telling me that, like, you know, the All Blacks were playing in the Aviva, and after the game, like, you know, you can imagine how rugby, like, the amount of different things, tapes, different things that would be in the dressing room. You can imagine at the end of it, jerseys thrown all over the place, it would probably be a bit of a kip. But he said to me, he could not believe that he was seeing, like, the Richie McCalls and the top players were cleaning up after themselves. They weren't, like, waiting for someone to come in and clean up after them and all that. They actually cleaned up everything and the place was left as they got it. And it's just their way of doing things, like, you know. So, like, you know, that would be a thing that, you know, I would hammer home to players and all that. Like, you know, that every time you go to the dressing room, every time you go somewhere, you don't just throw things around. You say a please and thank you and you leave it as you got it. And that would be something that would be, you know, very much across international teams and everything as well, like, you know.
And obviously, so we speak about that as an off the pitch point, if you like, and it's obvious that that's about, you know, developing the person. But also, you look at the top players that have played the game. The vast majority of them have really good human qualities, and, you know, humility is actually probably a word that springs to mind when you look at a lot of those players. So you see a Damien Duff, for example, and he's back now working in Shamrock Rovers and kind of out of the limelight, if you like, and is just going about his business. Um, do you think that's important if you've got that 15, 16-year-old who maybe does leave the country and goes to a whoever over in England or Scotland? Is that now an important part of their makeup, if you like?
Yeah, look, you're going to have to be mentally strong and so on. But when it's probably more when they come back, as well, because and it comes from their parent as well, and so on, to keep them grounded, like, as well, because, like, look, if you go into Man City now, I mean, you have the best of everything, not just the first team, everyone down along, the 12s, 13s, it's the best facility I've ever seen. So, like, sometimes then when a player comes back, like, he thinks, like, I'm this, I'm that, and so on. But, like, what you have to realise as well, like you say in the Gary O'Neill, who came back to Ireland, like, you could be over in one of the best academies or whatever, but in 2 or 3 years' time, you could be playing with Accrington Stanley, like, or no disrespect to them, like, but that's the whole fact of it, like, so, and that would be something as well, like, that we would bear in mind as well with international squads as well, like, that, no one is too big for the team, or thinks they're this or that, whatever, that they come in, and no matter who they're playing for or whoever, everything is respect and so on. But, like, now you say Damien Duff, like, what really I think is excellent about Damien Duff. I was up the other day looking at a UFA license course, and he was on it, like, and it's great to see Damien coming back and doing the courses. But, like, he's coaching, like, your 15s and your 16s in Shamrock Rovers, like, that's what I love to see as well. He wasn't looking to see, I want to be first team coach straight away at Shamrock Rovers, or I want to be this or that. He comes back, and it's a great one as well, that I've seen over in Holland, like, and Germany as well. I remember, and even in Spain as well. I remember one time actually, seeing Sergi, who was an excellent full back on the dream team of Barcelona, and here he's coaching the under 14s in Barcelona, like, that's what you want to see. Dennis Bergkamp, like, was coaching the under 10s in Ajax, like, so imagine being an under 10 player and having him as your coach, but also for that player to come back and say, I'm not going to be looking straight away to the first team. I'm going to work my way up along, get experience, and then I'll be in a better place to take on a job like that in the future, like,
Yeah, and it's an interesting point, and it's one that I suppose has come up on our website even over the past couple of weeks, is that there's a kind of an understanding and an acceptance that there's an apprenticeship when you become a player. So, you start off grassroots, you've already spoke about the different levels. You might be an apprentice or an YTS over in England. Everyone accepts that kind of apprenticeship. But when you look at kind of management or even high up coaching roles, you see a player just literally walk off the pitch from retirement and go straight into that big position. And is that a problem that you see that's particularly on these shores, or?
Look, look, I think it's a problem. It's a problem probably all over the world, like, as such, like, But on the other thing as well, on the other side as well, you'll have some coaches that might do a Kickstart 1 or Kickstart 2 and think the next Jose Mourinho, So you kind of have it both ways. But, like, I think I definitely think it is a bit of an issue. You even look. Gareth Southgate, I think, is a good example. He was a UEFA licensed coach, and next thing he was coaching the Premier League, and they wanted to there was a big argument over we want him and all that, and he hadn't got his badges and all that, but the pro license for the Premier League, but there was a big huffle at the time about it. But now, like, Gareth has gone back. He's done a good few years with the English set up as technical director and 21 coach and so on. And he's probably in a good place now, compared to where he was coming as UEFA B coach. We seen Niall Quinn as well, took over at Sunderland as well, like, and found it tough going, like, So like, you see them examples all over the place. Like, you even look, for me, who what coach I look at, as being one of the best in the world at the moment is Pep Guardiola. But, like, and I was just talking to a coach about this last night. Pep Guardiola, towards the end of his time as a player, started to go around to different places. He went to Brescia, he went over to Mexico for a little while as well, and started to learn off coaches. And he'd done that with a view to him being a coach. Then, like, you know, he gets his qualifications. He's coach of Barcelona's B, right? And you know, then he makes he step up. And at the time, people are going, "Jesus, he's he experienced enough to be Barcelona manager and all that." But people didn't have seen all the background stuff, all the information, all the studying he'd done, and so on and so forth. So, you know, that has to be seen as well, like, you know.
And because that's a great point, and I think that can sometimes be the difference, that when we talk about experience, we're not necessarily talking about age, or we're not really talking about maybe that quick transition from being a player to a manager. We're talking about what have you done to give yourself this experience for a new job. And I remember in that time that he spent, I think, 12 hours in a room with Marcelo Bielsa, just kind of discussing the game. Love to be a fly on the wall for that discussion. I'm not sure what your Spanish or
same as yours.
It would have been Spanish, but we could have got a translator, I guess. But yeah, so it's just that willingness to and that humility. So I remember when he was flying it with Barcelona, he was asked the question for the first time. People are saying, "You're the best coach in the world. Are you the best coach in the world?" And he said, "No, Marcelo Bielsa is," and he was at Athletic Bilbao at the time. And so that you've achieved everything you can achieve in the game, and yet, you know, he has his mentors and his idols.
Yeah, 100%. Like, you know, when you say Bielsa there as well, like, I just read a book there recently, In the Shadow of Bielsa.
Jed Davis.
Yeah, from Jed Davis. Excellent book as well, like, you know, and that would what I recommend now for coaches to read as well. But like, that's the thing, like, you know, Bielsa, he hasn't like probably like won many titles and so on and so forth, but he has so many disciples as such, and people that really, really look up to him as a coach. So, you know, so there's success like in titles, and there's success in terms of your philosophy and your way of doing things and so on. You know, so like, you know, success comes in many different ways. But definitely Bielsa would be one I would myself as well had a keen interest in his ways and so on.
And I think those guys are interesting to look at, because, you know, as youth developers, if you like, we can't go and sign a player, obviously, or you know, we can't ask someone to write a check. So you look at a Bielsa in a Athletic Bilbao, and you can only sign Basque players, and so now your philosophy and your methods as a coach become massively important, because, you know, you can't just dip into the transfer market.
Yeah.
Right, we've gone a little bit sidetracked, but that was always going to happen, I guess. We'll go back to the Irish under 16s. Do yourself and Paul Assam, obviously Paul Assam, a legendary player with St. Patrick's Athletic here in Ireland, and has now transitioned from being a development officer, and is now, along with yourself, coaching internationally. How would you describe your style of play for the 16s, and where does it come from? Does it come from a wider philosophy within the association?
Yeah, look, you know, it comes from the very, very, very get-go. If a player comes in under 12 into a regional ETP, like, you know, that's, you know, we want to play, like, you know, play the ball from the back, you know, play through the thirds and so on, have players that are comfortable in possession, but being well able to defend as well, being aware of the transitions and so on, like, you know, but, you know, look, your style and your philosophy and this and that is one thing, you know, but it again, it's getting that across to the players and communicating that to the players, and for them then to be able to take it on and understand their roles and responsibilities on the pitch, because, you know, you can have your tactics boards and you can go through things for an hour before a game and analyse this and analyse that and so on and so forth, but at the end of the day, players cross over the line and the white line, and they need to perform the actions. I haven't been able to see a scenario yet where anyone is able to pause it in the middle of a game, an under 16 game anyway, and say, sorry, can you come here and you go there, like, so, like, that's the big thing, you know. I think there's a bit too much at times about formations and philosophies and this and that, like, you know. I think a lot of it is your communication, how you can get across the players and all that, and their understanding. And the big thing as well is, like, every player, like, you know, is different, like, you know. So one player might take something on and go out and form no problem. Another player, you might have to take him aside. Another player, you might have to give him, you know, that kind of pat in the back and say you're really, really good and so on, to give him a bit of confidence. Then another player might need a kick in the backside, like, to really get him going, like, you know. Not literally.
Yeah, and I mean, what you're talking about there is that human side, and that's been something that's popped up in all of our podcasts so far. And I think when you see the discussions on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, you know, that post-match analysis where people go wild, the fact that you're talking about, okay, it might be an expensive millionaire footballer, you're talking about a human being, do you know what I mean? And I think that gets lost with everybody, observers in the game, but also looking at from our perspective as people that are fundamentally working with young players, does that get lost at times that you're dealing with someone here, we don't know what's been happening in his life during the day?
Like for me, that's massive, and it's an area I think everyone needs to get educated in, as well as the whole kind of mental side of the game, like and mental well-being and mental health, like because the things you can say and split second and so on and so forth can last an absolute lifetime, like, so it's very very very, and no more so. You mentioned there, like, look, how would you think Claudio Bravo is probably feeling this week? People think, oh, he's grand, he's probably getting 3 million a week, or 3 million a year or whatever. But I mean, he's probably got it, like, and it's funny, like, you have this week kind of two different examples. You have him who the ball came back to him, he went to play it out to one of his centre backs and so on, the ball's taken off him and he gets sent off and so on. But then you had the Dundalk game where the keeper went to kick it as far as he could and sliced it, and the same thing happened. But it's different philosophies, or different actions they were going to do in the game. But like, players make mistakes, like, and it was a little thing I seen this morning, actually. Someone interviewing Pep Guardiola, like, and saying to him, like, are you going to change your philosophy now, like, over the results that you have seen in the last few days? Absolute rubbish. Like, I don't know where the journalist was coming with it, like, and there's one thing, Pep doesn't have that kind of, the arrogance or whatever, but he just kind of turned around and said, well, like, look, I'm not going to change, I'm never going to change, I'll always play from the keeper, and I think that's the best way to play, right? And I've thought about it, at times you do think about it, but he says, hold on a minute, like, I've won 21 titles in 7 years, right, playing that way, like, so why would I change, like, and, like, I think the journalist swallowed himself up there, and he didn't say anything much after that.
Yeah, and I think it's a tough one, because you can't really win if you're Pep Guardiola, because when you win things, it's because you got the best players, and when you lose it's because of your philosophy. Whereas, would Messi be the Messi we know today if he didn't have a Pep when he had a Pep? Do you know what I mean? So he was obviously a great player under Frank Rijkaard, but it's hard to make the argument that Pep Guardiola didn't improve him as a player. That Barcelona team where it is today, it's standing on the shoulders, maybe, if you like, of what he created when he was there.
It was gas to see, like, getting better at night, like, but it was everything that, like, he created, and you'd say Cruyff as well. Another good book I'm reading at the moment, actually.
Well, we're definitely going to have to get you back to review some of these books that you're reading. But so you look, obviously, probably it's interesting. Luis Enrique doesn't probably get a massive amount of credit, but he has evolved that team then as well. So and that's something we may look at in the coming weeks. But sticking on Ireland for a second, so playing style. So like you said, the players you have will dictate how you tweak and change things, and you got to be player centered in that approach. But a young goalkeeper now that might be listening to the podcast that has aspirations of playing underage for Ireland, what are the attributes you're looking for in that position?
Well, look, first and foremost, like, what's the basics of goalkeeping? You need to be able to stop the ball. You need to be, good in the air, and so on and so forth. Like, the basics of goalkeeping, you'd say. But as we all know, goalkeeping has evolved, and not so much, your feet are very, very important and so on, but it's your decision making is absolutely crucial, like, so when to kick it long, when to kick it short, all that stuff is absolutely massive, and you need to have good feet. There's no doubt about that. But as well, like, which is absolutely key, is your organisation and your defensive organisation. More so even when we have the ball, like, so I see, these days now, when you see a keeper and the ball's gone down the other end of the pitch and he's kind of going, like, everything's grand and all that, and he's just following the ball. But what he, like, should be thinking about when we're attacking, he should be thinking about defending. So what if we lose the ball? And that's absolutely crucial, like, and that little bit of communication. It doesn't have to be roaring and bawling, because you see keepers some days and they're just roaring and shouting, and it's like, it's there's not specific, no information, but if you good detailed information at the right times. But that's the big one when I see, and I even say it to defenders as well. We're attacking, the ball's gone on the other end of the field. If you're just following the ball, you're not concentrating in terms of if we lose the ball, right? And it's the very, very same thing as well you look for with wingers, maybe in centre forward. If we're defending and it's gone past you and you're not involved anymore maybe in the defensive setup, what are you thinking about now? You need to be thinking about, am I in a position to receive the ball if we win it, right? I'm not up beside the centre back and making it easy for him. So these are the things. So when you're attacking, you need to be thinking defending. When you're defending, you need to be thinking attacking, plain and simple.
Okay, so you and again, that's tactical, I guess, but being able to do it is mental, right? And you mentioned that word decision making. Any coaches, I guess, listening into the podcast that's dealing with young players, what's your advice to those coaches in helping us produce better decision makers here in Ireland?
Like, the big thing, with coaching, I think it's probably evolving as well, and maybe some people have done the national C licence and so on. You'll see how things are changing in terms of how we want coaches to go about their coaching, but like there's no such thing as an ideal coach and so on, but one thing I would say though in your training sessions and in your little practices and so on is that it must be set up that the players, without you going in and giving elaborate information, are able to kind of understand the practice and get the main points out of it. So like in a small example, if we're playing a 4v4 game and there's 4 goals, well, if you're attacking one of them goals and the other one is absolutely opened, can the players see and look for a little switch? Like, that's a simple little example, but you don't need to go in and talk for 15 minutes of an hour session about things like that. Like, that should be something the players should pick up, and even you just bringing out a few little questions and asking, well, if this goal is packed here and there's 3 or 4 defenders here, what about the other goal? And they'll make the decisions. Players are very, very intelligent these days as well. Like, they have a good idea of the game now, in fairness to them.
And you mentioned that the power of asking a question, and I think I'd like to direct anyone that's listening onto the About section of our website and to have a little look at a TED Talk there, and might open some of the coaches listening their mind in terms of, helping kids learn. Not telling them the answer maybe, or giving them the information maybe isn't always the best method. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Look, there's like, this is the thing as well, and when we go into coach education and all that, like, you have coaches like, and they have a certain way of doing things and all that. And we don't want robot coaches that like everything has to be done a certain way, and you have your own style and so on and so forth. But if you just like go and you get a player and you tell him, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and so on and so forth, he's not making his own decisions. Right, he's not making his own decisions. He's not having to think outside the box, and like it goes back to just practical examples. Like, again, if you're in school and you just have a teacher that's up the front and they're reading out a book, or you're reading out a book or whatever, you're not really taking that in. But if they go, well, what do you think of this, and what do you think of this, like, I don't know, history or whatever, or geography or whatever it is you're doing, and you're asked the question, right? You might be asleep and all of a sudden you'll be awake, but that's the thing. Like, now you're actually out of your comfort zone. You have to think about it. You have to put thoughts together, and that's what we want players doing now. Because the days, if you want to be a really, really top player, where you receive the ball and then you decide what you're going to do next, are well gone. You need to have a player now that is thinking 1 and 2 steps ahead, so that they're really, really intelligent players. And the whole thing about intelligence as well, like, you can have intelligence inside the classroom and someone that gets 100% in the maths test and all that, but intelligence in the football field is totally different. And I've dealt with a few what I would call dopes in my days, with players that mightn't be the brightest at certain things, but they're definitely very, very bright on the football field and have a very, very good game understanding.
And it's like you said, it's different forms of intelligence, because I think you can have people as well, that get X amount of points in their leaving cert, and what they're good at is reproducing information. But if you ask them maybe the consequence, so the Battle of Hastings, what date is it? And they can tell you, okay, it's 1066, or I may be wrong there before anyone gets on. But okay, what's the consequence of it? What did it mean at that time? Do you know what I mean? And I think that can be the issue maybe with some of our soccer players. If even in the dressing room after a game, if you go to the fullbacks, what am I looking for you to do? They might be able to regurgitate the word overlap, but do they really know what it is? Do they know why they're doing it? So that's a challenge definitely for us, I think, as coaches in the region.
I think that's something as well, Conor, just when you're on it, like, I think with coaches as well, like, you have a lot of coaches maybe, and there's so much content now online and so on, and you can see loads and loads of stuff, but it's actually being able to observe it on the field, or being able to show it when you go out, because you can have all the session plans and this and that, but it's crossing over the white line again, and being able to demonstrate or guide players towards them things as well is important.
Yeah, so that observation, so knowledge and turning it into observation. So talk to us about your experience with the 16s international team, and maybe some of the teams you've faced, and anything kind of outside of the norm maybe that you've encountered?
Well, I would say it's been a massive learning experience, because you could be in, maybe in for example in emerging talent, and a lot of teams would play the 1-4-3-3, and you've got a good understanding of all that. But then when you go and play international football and you come up against a team that, for example, when we played Scotland last year, really, really pressed us, and it was actually a scenario where their full backs were actually pressing our full backs. Which is something we're we hadn't really seen this before, So it's not even a learning environment for the players. We're on the sideline going, how are we going to start this as well, and that's the one thing, that has been a brilliant learning experience for me in the last 12 months is coming up against them scenarios and then going, right, how are we going to start this first and get it right in my head, but then how am I going to get this across to the players? Maybe in the game, which is very, very difficult, and then obviously if you've got a half time or if you're playing them again in a second game, to get across from in between the games and so on. But that would be one I would have said, Scotland. We play against Wales as well, Wales, favourite playing three at the back as well, so that's something that's a little bit different as well. When we played against Austria, they had a very, very good player from Bayer Leverkusen. You couldn't actually say what position he was playing in because he was just all over the place. So how do you look after that? Who looks after that player? Does someone follow him? Does someone do that? It was all learning experiences for us.
Right. So I'm going to zoom in because there's a lot of good examples there. I'm going to plug the website again, just in terms of, you mentioned the back three. Manchester United go up against Chelsea this weekend and will probably go up against the back three. So keep an eye on the website for some visual learning on that one. We don't have visual learning here on a podcast, unfortunately. I'd like to with some of the situations you've described. But let's go back to the Scotland game. So you're playing out from the back. At what stage is the Scottish fullback pressing the Irish fullback?
For the very, very get-go. Right, so everyone, it's basically nearly a man for man on their whole team, now the same day as well, there was a gale force wind blowing down the pitch, and we were against it in the first half. And they really, really pressed up, and it was just very, very difficult. And look, you can have your philosophies and want to play out from the back and so on, but in them scenarios, you're going to probably have to kick it somewhere or so on and so forth, and work off them different things as well. So that comes back to decision making again for players, because you go and you tell a player, oh, we want to play out from the back, and then they go and play out from the back there, and they're playing it basically to a one-on-one. Again, it's decision making for players.
Yeah, so it comes back to that understanding. Why are we getting you to play out the back? It's not just for the aesthetics. It's because we believe it's going to give us superiority and lead to us winning the game. So if the player doesn't maybe understand the reasons why we're doing something, then maybe that leads to.
Yeah, and it comes to your circumstances as well. You can see in that game, Scottish coaches knew the conditions and so on and so forth, so they dealt with that. And in the second half it changed around, because it was different for us and the conditions and so on and so forth. But yeah, it comes back to the players again, having to make decisions there and then, and that's the real difference between a very, very good player and a really, really good player. Is to be able to make them decisions there and then, and then carry out the actions.
You speak about that. We'll stick to that for a sec, right? So, how important in a scenario like this, where the player is potentially thinks he's doing what the coach wants him to do, so in a way he's trying to please the coach, how important is bond between player and coach in moments like this, so that maybe the player can almost feel like he's going against the coach's demands? Do you know what I mean? So what can you do there as a coach to try and give them the freedom to express themselves when they feel they have to?
Well, that comes back again to the environment you set. If you're there and again, and you're there, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to play, and so on, and you don't ask the players, so we'd have an environment where, if we're doing something for games and we might have a tactics board or we might have some visual or whatever, we'd actually get the players to come up and show us what they think. Right, and again, that's even back to developing the person again, because going up in front of people, speaking in front of the board and all that, it might be for that scenario and see if he understands and all that, but again, it's developing the person as well, right? So and they will give their ideas and all that, but it all comes back to, and something that Paul Ozam always says, that it's all great being able to talk about it on a tactics board, but it's when you go out in the field, it's a different story. And players I would hope they have that kind of thing that they can go, well, look, I think this is the best course of action at that time and in this scenario, because there's only so many scenarios you can paint as well, be it on the coaching field and be it on the tactics board and be it on a PowerPoint or whatever. There'll always be something you'll experience in the pitch that you mightn't have seen before.
Great shout. Okay, and I suppose again I'll lead some people that are listening to the website, and we have a piece in our session plans on coaching methodology, and there's a little bit on that about helping players problem solve and come up with decisions, and it's definitely, I think, something going forward we need to keep looking at. You mentioned Paul or Sam speaking about that kind of, being a problem solver and solving problems. I'm not sure who coined the quote. It was a famous boxer that everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. So I think there's a lot in that, and it probably does come back to what we spoke about at the outset of, players need to be playing as much as possible if they're going to be problem solvers, and that's potentially a problem for us here in Ireland with the environment that we have. And it'll lead me to my final question for you. What do you think clubs and leagues here need to do to help their players reach their potential? So I suppose before you answer that, what do you think is happening in a positive sense that is helping players, and then what maybe additionally do we need to be thinking about doing?
Well, look, we're here like in Nini FC, and you have Nini FC here, you have Ballymackey out the road, you've got our Rovers and Knights all around here, you've got your BT Harps. Some great facilities are in place. There's some very, very good coaches in them clubs as well. What we probably, I suppose, need is kind of nearly a consistent message, because what I see at some clubs, you might have the under-11 coach who could be brilliant, real development oriented, really, really good to the players, and so on and so forth. And then on the under-12 manager could be the complete opposite, and be very forceful, doesn't give much decision making to the players, maybe isn't organised, turns up in a pair of jeans and so on. Like, these are scenarios that we do see, but that's probably the big thing. Can we get that consistency across the board, and that consistent message? Because I was in France during the summer. I want many days like that again, where you're supporting Ireland and so on, and not only are you supporting them, it was great, but even pushing on, and even going further and so on. That's what we all want to see. But when you get back then, and maybe sometimes the grassroots, we have a lot of scenarios where people are pulling against each other and so on. So I think if we get that consistent message and everyone's going for the greater good, I think we'll be in a better place. Now, obviously we talked about, if you've got a player on your team and you're only coaching him once a week, is he really going to develop his potential? Right, that's a big thing. So if coaches come into me and say, "Oh, we've got money once a week," I'm just go, well, "Can you go twice a week?" And go, "Well, we only have the AstroTurf for one slot a week." And I say, "Well, what about the local hall? Go and play futsal. Do X, Y, and Z." Same thing again. If you've got them twice a week, is there something else you can do? Maybe if they're maybe 14, 15, 16, could you get him in to do a little bit of strength and conditioning or whatever? So these are all things that I think we need to start looking at to develop players even more, and maybe think outside the box a little bit more as well. And then the big thing is we want more and more players coming through into the league centres, and encourage them to go to the league centres, into the regional centres and so on. And then we'll have a higher quantity and quality of players that are representing Ireland and so, or at the highest level in the different regions and so on, and it'll just drive everyone up. I think what's a big one as well is and it goes back to that kind of developing the person as well. If you're everyone singing off the same hymn sheet, and someone's the work rate, attitude, respect, all that is done very, very well, then you have players that maybe are in a regional centre, or players that are in a league centre, going back to their clubs and being the best trainer and have the best attitude and so on, because they're the people that will lead all the rest of the guys on. Now, if I go back, and if I'm on an emerging talent squad and I go back to my local club, and if I go in and I'm late for training and I can't be bothered and give cheek to the coach and all that, that's going to have a detrimental effect to the rest of the players. Whereas if I go back and I am the best trainer, I'm there beforehand, I'm doing my extra work, I'm saying, guys, you need to do this, you need to do that, I'm telling guys, you need to buck up, guys, and so on and so forth, I guarantee you the standard will go through the roof, right? And that's what we really, really need, from our players as well, to be that role model in their clubs.
James, thank you very much. I think with the content of your answers, hopefully people find it insightful. Particularly with that last answer, I think the passion in which you deliver your message. I think there's a lesson in that for everyone that listens, that, you know, football at the end of the day is a passion for us all, whether we're coaches, players, parents even, that it's really about a love and desire for the game. And if people can pass that on like you have in our, I think, 40 to 50 minutes, then we've got a chance in this country of producing some really top quality players in the future. Best of luck to yourself and Paula Sam for the rest of the season. And on behalf of everyone in Football Discovery, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Conor, and I'd like to wish you the best of luck as well on your new venture wherever you go, and on the website as well. It's top class, so the very best of luck with it.
Thanks very much. So that concludes this week's podcast. James Scott is a man I have had the pleasure of knowing for nearly a decade now. His massive love of the beautiful game is equalled only by his desire to help others. It looks like he may be able to add you guys to the long list of people he's helped along the way on his football journey. Speaking of helping others, we'd like to mention Alan McCarthy, who edits this podcast and edits a lot of the content on footballdiscovery.com. He does a wonderful job, and if you're looking for somebody in the web design or web maintenance market, go to footballdiscovery.com, and on the bottom left-hand side of the page, you'll see Alan's site. We'll finish today with a quote from, well, James Scott. Every day is a school day. Thanks for stopping by.